The next event in our program is a panel organized by Professor Richard Murray. So in early 2000s, Shuki had a vision that Caltech was a really perfect place to create program focusing on information due to the Caltech's leadership in that area. So then one day during lunch with Shuki, Richard just said, like, let's do it. And the rest is history. So over the years, IST had a major impact on Caltech in so many areas. Please welcome Richard Murray, Michelle Efros, John Preskill, Leonard Schulman, and Adam Wehrman.
Great. Okay, so you've already heard a little bit from Yasser about IST and some of the things it did. So we want to, kind of maybe give a little bit more color to some of that and some of the things that go on. So my story with Shuki, he started a couple of years after I did. I'm sure we knew each other at the time. But the first time I sort of really remember kind of interacting with Shuki was in the context of the Engineering Applied Science Division Chair search. And so in November of 1999, so we go back now over 25 years, John Seinfeld had announced that he was stepping down after 10 years. And so a Division Chair search committee was formed, and Shuki was on that committee. As usually happens in these division chair searches, the committee goes and sort of talks to everybody in the division and says, what should we be looking for in the next division chair? And so I guess Shuki got assigned to me. I was on sabbatical at the time. I was actually living in Connecticut working in Caltech Technologies. And so on one of my trips back, I got this email from Shuki saying, hey, can we meet? I'd like to get your thoughts on the next division chair. And so that was the first time I remember, kind of having a conversation with Shuki about what we should be doing. I'm sure we had many conversations before that, just as members of the faculty, but that one I kind of remember. And that was in January of 2000. So then in March of 2000, I get an email from Stacy Scoville saying, the provost would like to meet with you on your next trip back to Caltech. Okay, I don't know why the provost wants to meet with me. I was, basically an associate professor at the time, had no, sort of inclination or anything. And Steve Coonan, who was the provost at the time, says, I was wondering if you'd consider serving as the next division chair of engineering applied science, which I found very surprising. Had not thought about this at all. And so, talked to Steve about it and said, geez, I really don't know whether I can do this, should do this, et cetera. What is the expectation, et cetera? Would it be okay for me to talk with members of the committee to kind of understand what, why my name was on the list and, whether this is something I could do and kind of help with? And so Steve said, yes, that's okay to do that. And so I reached out to all of the members of the committee, one of whom was Shuki, who had, of course, talked with me. And I remember that conversation very well because, we had this very deep conversation about, what should the division be doing? How could I help? But also, how could we work together to do that, right? And I think one of the things that, kind of Shuki understood as an executive at IBM and other places was, that it really takes a team of people to do things, and you have to find your partners, right? And you've heard this already, and you have to really work with them and help everybody be successful. And we've all been partners in that kind of journey together. So I remember talking with Shuki about this and, kind of coming to a decision about that, more or less saying, Shuki, I'm going to need your help. And that was the first of many times that he said, yes, I will help. And then I said, yes, I will help back. And we've, kind of partnered in a number of different ways. So in April of 2000, I decided to accept the position of division chair in engineering applied science. The email went out, your start date's not for a little while later, but essentially you start the instant that the email goes out and everybody knows you're the person that, is the next division chair, and so the one who's going to have to say yes or no to a bunch of different things. And so in June of 2000, I started as division chair. And I, kind of looked back, Shuki and I had already had a conversation about a little bit about what were some of the opportunities and other things. But it was really almost a year later, in April of 2001, that I had a meeting with Shuki about starting what at the time was called the Info School. That was sort of the original term that we used for IST. And so this idea that you already heard, right, that Caltech could be a particularly special place for information. And so we started having these conversations about what it would look like. Around that time, there was a campaign going on. So David Baltimore was the president, and we had a big campaign, which eventually ended up being a campaign to raise $1.4 billion for Caltech that David led. And so we knew that there was a campaign coming, and so we should think about what the priorities for the division were and what those areas should be. And so that led to this idea that one of the things, there were multiple things that were on the engineering applied science kind of strategic plan for that, but that one of the things ought to be to do something in the area of information and to do something to make it special. And so in July of that year, so we're now in 2001, Shuki and I met with Steve Koonin, who was the provost at the time, and David, and talked about, this is an area that we ought to do something. And Shuki had a vision for what this might be, and so we, kind of started talking with the leadership at Caltech about what we could do in that area and how to pull that together. In October of 2001, Gordon and Betty Moore announced that they were giving $600 million to Caltech. It was the largest gift to Institute of Higher Education at the time. It was an amazingly generous contribution from Gordon and Betty that was part of that campaign. And so that really was now an opportunity to take this idea of information science and technology and invest in it in a way that we could kind of realize this sort of vision that Shuki had. And so the other thing I remember quite distinctly at the time was saying, okay, well, now we got to decide what is this, right? What is IST going to be? And so Shuki and I met with the other five division chairs, right, and had a conversation, right? What about information in physics? What about information in biology? What about information in chemistry? What about information in social humanities and social sciences, right? And had these really interesting conversations. I remember we would go sit, right, sort of usually outside, right, because it was, it's California, and we'd go sit at a table and talk with one of the division chairs about what this overlap might be. And one of the things that struck me was it was really about what is the intersection of information with things that you might not normally think about as information, like physics, right, or biology. But then, of course, the realization is that biology is information and physics is information. And you're going to hear some of that, I think, as we kind of go through. And that information really pervades all of these areas in a certain way. And that was something that I think Shuki had understood. And so in April of 2002, so now a couple of years after, right, sort of these initial conversations, we decided to, Steve and David decided to put together a committee to put together a vision for what we might do, right, in information science and technology. So that was the IST Planning Committee. And that IST Planning Committee included John and Michelle, who were both on that at the time. So in April 2002, they were charged to put together a plan for what IST might be. And that happened over the summer of 2002. And John and others will tell you a little bit more about that from their recollections. But essentially, that committee, which is a pretty big committee, I think it was like 15 or 16 people total. So that's a large group of people to try and get together and agree on something. Sort of over the summer, put together this plan for what IST should be. And that led to the proposal that eventually went to the Moore Foundation. We built on some strengths that we already had. So the Lee Center for Advanced Networking was here. Dave Rutledge was the head of that. The center, what was CNSE, Center for Neural Systems Engineering or something like that, that I think Pietro Proner was the director of. Bob Carroll was the kind of managing director of and sort of running. Were part of that, but really it was to start 4 new things. And those 4 new things were the Center for Biological Circuit Design, the Social Information Systems Laboratory, CISL, the Center for the Physics of Information, and the Center for the Mathematics of Information. And that's what we put into that, kind of initial proposal. And Yasser showed you kind of some of the output from all of that, right? I don't know, like 16 different activities, right? But you can really trace a lot of that back to that initial vision, right? And it was interesting because it was really thinking about, how do we intersect information with physics? How do we intersect it with mathematics in a deep way, right? So information theory was certainly an area, but other parts of mathematics as well. How do we intersect it with biology? How do we intersect it with kind of all these different pieces? So it was really kind of fascinating time to have those conversations go through. The committee did a fantastic job, put together a report. And articulated a vision for what it could be. In November of 2002, they gave that. They thought that we needed about $100 million. That was sort of the kind of overall ask that included a number of different things, right? One was these 4 new centers. Another was a new building. And so really over time, that all got started. So Shuki was appointed, as you heard, as the initial IST director. We started up activities. Bob Carroll, who's here, was the initial kind of managing director and partner with Shuki to kind of pull all of those things together. Mary Sikora later sort of took that over. And kind of got everything started. In addition to the IST initiative and the Moore Foundation sort of funding that you'll hear about, with David's help, we also reached out to the Annenberg Foundation and raised another, so about $25 million or so that came from the Moore Foundation, another $25 million that came from Annenberg to put up the Annenberg building that we now all enjoy, the Annenberg Building for Information Science and Technology. So that's some of that, kind of initial bit of how we got started. And so maybe I'll hand it over over to hear a little bit more about some of those specific areas. And so I'll hand it over to John Preskill next.
All right, thank you, Richard. I'm a theoretical physicist, not that there's anything wrong with that. But as a result, information science was not part of my education. But somehow in the mid-1990s, I developed a passionate interest in quantum information, partly because of the potential of technologies for quantum computing and quantum measurement, but more importantly than that for me was the opportunity for concepts from information science to deepen our understanding of some of the deepest issues about physical systems, when many electrons interact with one another, even the quantum properties of space and time. So I had to acquire a working knowledge of topics on which Shuki is an expert, like error correction and channel capacity, computational complexity, algorithms. I learned all those things by teaching them to Caltech students, starting in 1997. And encouraged by Jeff Kimball, a like-minded experimental physicist, we had the temerity to propose to the National Science Foundation an institute for quantum information focused on the theoretical aspects of that topic, and miraculously it was funded. It was the first center, I think, in the world with that research focus. And that created a problem because we envisioned a vibrant center with many postdoctoral scholars and visitors, and there was no place to put it. But very luckily for us, just a couple of months earlier, Richard had become the chair of the Division of Engineering and Applied Science, and he was very enthusiastic about this idea and helped to create the space that we needed in Jorgensen and Steele Laboratories, which we occupied until moving to the Annenberg Center in 2009. Now, a pivotal moment was when Shuki invited me to lunch in early 2002. We had been previously acquainted because we had once together given a presentation to Dan Golden, who was the NASA administrator, about information science things going on at the Caltech campus while Golden was visiting JPL. So I had taken note of Shuki's compelling charisma. I mean, Yasser said it, who can resist that smile, right? So he makes a deep impression. So at that lunch, Shuki explained his vision for the IST initiative. And we really felt like kindred spirits because we shared the belief that information concepts could greatly accelerate progress, not just in the physical sciences, but many other things besides that were included in IST. So everyone in the room, or most of you in the room, know that it's virtually impossible to refuse Shuki. And so I became a member of the IST Planning Committee, and we met many times during the summer of 2002 until we had written that proposal to the Moore Foundation in November. And that was successful and resulted in the creation of the IST Institute with Shuki as director, and it included a Center for the Physics of Information, which I was to lead. You know, we complain about committees for good reason, but sometimes committees bring people together. In a case like this, people from different divisions and scientific areas got to know one another, and it was Shuki that brought us together, and that had an impact, I think, on many of us that was long-lasting. Well, that Center for the Physics of Information was a big success. CPI, we called it. It augmented and expanded the Institute for Quantum Information by including a lot of experimental activity. The IQI had originally been a theoretical center. Many young people passed through as postdocs. There were 26 in all over a 6-year period. Many of them have become major scientific leaders in the US and Europe, Australia, Israel, other places. The CPI wound down in 2009. We had exhausted the funding, but that was not the end of the story. We were encouraged by the success of the Center for the Physics of Information. I joined with experimental physicists Jeff Kimball and Jim Eisenstein. We called ourselves the 3 Js. We were Jeff, Jim, and John, on a crusade to expand quantum information science at Caltech. And we did manage to attract another Moore Foundation award to expand the quantum information activity, and that gave us the leverage to create an expanded institute, NSF Physics Frontiers Center, which became the Institute for Quantum Information and Matter, which cuts across physics, applied physics, computer science, electrical engineering, chemistry, and material science at Caltech. It has a balance of theory and experiment, and I think it's very much in line with the IST vision that Shuki had articulated. So you can see one thing led to another. If it hadn't been for Richard and Shuki, the IQI might not have been able to thrive. There might have been no Center for Physics of Information. There might have been no Institute for Quantum Information and Matter, and other things besides, which we'll get to if we have time. So I'm profoundly grateful to Shuki for his leadership and all he's done for information science and technology at Caltech and in the broader world. So thank you, Shuki.
Okay, and we'll move on to Leonard Schulman.
Hi. So I joined the Institute in 2000, and I should maybe say that Shuki was one of the reasons that I came. I'm a theoretical computer scientist, at least officially. At least that's the card you carry in your. And Shuki was really the only person at the Institute that kind of overlapped that field. He did. You don't think of that maybe as his primary field nowadays. It's sort of double E and this biological engineering, and that's a lot of the footprint we're seeing. But Shuki did a lot of work that is definitely theory work. So harmonic analysis of polynomial threshold functions and AC naught functions and spectral norms. I thought, asymptotic, all of his coding theory work is you could call that theory of CS. Efficient algorithms for sort of distributed protocols. A lot of his work sort of overlapped theory, and so now I was thinking of coming here as the first sort of full kind of theory person. That having Shuki to talk to and having Shuki as kind of one of the people bringing me in was really very, very critical. And I should say this connection became very real. So maybe 2 or 3 years after I came, so 2002 or 3 or something, some student knocks on my door, and he says, "I'm Shuki's student, and I'm thinking about propagation of wireless signals in cluttered environments, and wouldn't you like to think about that?" And so, given my extensive training in discrete mathematics and algorithms, I knew that an antenna was one of those long whippy things, and so I said sure, and so Massimo, who I see is here, hi Massimo, kept coming into my office, and we kept talking about this problem, and we did a paper that I think is kind of cool. And the three of us, we had this wonderful collaboration. And that wasn't the last time that I had sort of interacted with Shuki through a student. More recently, we had another student graduate, and very successfully. So this was sort of all true. Like what you saw is what you got, and then some more. So let's go back to these dates around 2003. So I was not involved in the formation of the IST in the way that other people, and I know Michelle will probably talk about perhaps. But one day Shuki asked me to go to lunch, and I sat down with him at lunch, and he said, well, there's going to be this Center for the Mathematics of Information, and how would you like to run it? There was a little more conversation around it. So it felt like a good fit to me. I'm one of these people who always has trouble like sticking to their lane. So like I said, I carry this card in my back pocket that says theory of CS, but kind of don't. I can't stay in my lane, and so I thought this would be a good place for me to be kind of reaching out and be kind of, and And so so I said yes, and we set up the steering committee that Michelle was on and Emmanuel Candes was on. And I thought I would tell you a little bit about what we did. Within, very quickly, within the beginning, I think we also funded some grad students. There were some other things we were funding, but very quickly, we realized that our niche was really to be a postdoc center primarily, and that was going to be the main kind of activity that we organized, is bringing in postdocs. And I mean, at the peak, we were recruiting 4 or 5 postdocs a year for 2-year postdocs. We had like 9-ish people around all the time. And so I thought I would say something about some of the reasons for that choice. Also, maybe look into the future. Maybe Adam will talk about, Caltech's future plan. So I thought maybe I would say something about our considerations. So in orders of increasing importance, these were our reasons. So first, our postdocs are research ready. There's not this long burn-in time when you're raising them as grad students. It's not as fulfilling as having a grad student, because but they come, they're research ready. And so it's sort of more suitable for forming the core of a research center. The other reason was supply and demand. So at the time, there were a lot of strong graduate programs in the country, but there wasn't a center like this. It was really the first one. There was, one or two people would take a postdoc at Microsoft and earn a lot of money, and there were a few little things, or you can go have a postdoc with an individual professor somewhere. There wasn't a place like this at all. So it really made a big splash, and especially given Caltech's a small place, that was significant. But the third reason, and the most important one, was that the whole idea of this creating the center was to make the faculty at Caltech more than the sum of our parts. We could each raise money, at least back in those days. I don't know about today. Everybody could raise their own money and bring in and have their own research group. But there's something about making something more than the sum of its parts. And so, in fact, we made this a real priority when we were selecting candidates, postdoc candidates, to make sure that there were at least 2 faculty interested in every candidate. This was like a principle that we adhered to pretty thoroughly as we went. And I think all these principles really served us very, very well. One other thing that made the place a glue was the CMI faculty lunches, which I'll leave for Michelle to, maybe she'll want to talk about that, because she organized that. The center worked out really well. We had these like 5 years of funding. We stretched out to 7 or 8 years. I remember my last annual report is filed in 2011. So there's essentially no more money. There's a little smidge. But there are still CMI postdocs, right? So I'm currently working with someone who's a CMI postdoc. There were, like, the name, like, you come in, there's the website. People are thinking about taking a Caltech offer. They kind of see what they're joining. They don't know that there's no money. And they come. And so it's these kind of building up a prestige and a kind of an identity was really important, just organizationally and culturally. I checked on our statistics before coming. We've had a total of 60 postdocs affiliated with the CMI in one form or another. Of those, 43, to my knowledge, went on to take faculty jobs somewhere or other, many at really top institutions. So, and this continues to today. Just a last word about Shuki as a colleague. One of his great virtues is he never meddles. So he would run, we'd have all these meetings of the ISD steering committee, and we'd have John and me, and Matt Jackson was running, and so we'd have the, whatever the 4 thing, and we'd all each report, and we consult each other, and he was very, not meddling, but could always see to the heart of the matter and have some really useful insight. The word gentle has been used. It was also in my notes for what I wanted to say. It was very gentle and but very insightful. So I want to thank him for all those insights and for that manner, and being kind of an older brother. It's been really great. Thanks.
Michelle.
Thank you. I have to say, it's fantastic looking out over this room. I have had so many of you in my classes over the years, or talks or other things, and so welcome back. It's great to see everybody. I'm fighting the urge to prove something on the board, but luckily I'm still holding it down. We'll see if I make it to the end, and I'll keep my comments really brief. Yes, I was a member of the IST committee, maybe IST planning committee, that was led as a sort of umbrella organization that eventually led to the formation of a number of centers that you've heard about on campus. People have commented that Shuki is extremely persuasive. I can agree with this without hesitation. So I was actually supposed to be on sabbatical. Actually, I was on sabbatical during about half the time that committee ran. And so that was the only committee that managed to follow me all the way to Boston. And I tried to participate as well as possible over the phone. And we had some technical challenges, but I was happy to participate in that and really benefited both personally and in the broader sense of Caltech's growth from the intersection between information theory and all of these other areas on campus, as well as the creation of the Center for the Mathematics of Information, which felt like some sort of a hub that these other centers could interact with at the center of information. Shuki's view of information and science and technology was extremely broad, including both an educational arm and a research arm. So you've heard a lot about the centers, but maybe heard less about the teaching. And let me just comment very briefly on that. Shuki started a class in, I don't know what year, but it dates back longer than our electronic records of TQFRs, so it's been quite some time, called IST4, which I think was Information and Logic. And it was his way of helping students very, very early on get exposed to information as a concept that pervades many different fields. I was not lucky enough to sit in on that class, so I can't comment on exactly how the class was taught or what it covered. But there are hints of it inside those old TQFRs, and I hope that you will forgive me for sharing some of that information, also a little bit confidential with this larger group. Some of the student comments included, this was a very enjoyable course to take. Shuki is one of the professors who, from the care he puts into his lectures, is truly passionate about the subject and wants his students to learn. Another student wrote, I really enjoyed taking your course. The first day of lecture, I have to admit that I was a bit confused as to why everything was in Comic Sans. And you chose to teach through magic boxes and monkeys. But as the weeks went on, I realized what a great teaching method that was and how much I was learning. It's impressive how you create the same feeling that the inventors felt when they were making a discovery. And just to quote one more, Professor Bruck never failed to brighten my day. His passion for the subject and his breadth of knowledge made it a pleasure to be part of IST4. I can genuinely say that Professor Bruck cared for each of his students. This class, IST4, is a class that I still receive emails about in an administrative role that I now hold. People are waiting for it to come back, Shuki, so hope springs eternal. This class was such a fantastic success on our campus that I think it was the class that inspired the nomination for Shuki Bruck when he received the Feynman Teaching Prize. As was mentioned earlier, the Feynman Teaching Prize is our highest teaching award at Caltech. Exactly one is given every academic year, and it's really a high honor. And even for those of us who have not spent time in Shuki's classes, I think we all know what a fantastic teacher he is by interacting with him. I think he's teaching inside and outside of the classroom at all times. So thank you, Shuki.
So So unlike the other folks up here, I got to join after IST was up and running, so I saw the benefit of all their hard labor when I walked in the door of Jorgensen, and actually came in with no students, but benefited greatly from CMI's postdoc crew, and adopted a couple of people in the audience that came in to work with Shuki and spent a little time with me in my first year or two as well. So it was really an amazing ecosystem to come into, somewhere where there was such a broad set of collaborators. And though I thought CMI would be my home when I was coming in and recruited, actually I found very quickly that a center we haven't heard as much about here, the SISL, the Social Information and Sciences Laboratory, ended up kind of adopted me and dragging me along, and I spent most of my first 4 or 5 years collaborating with economists through IST, even though I had never touched economics before showing up on Caltech's campus. And I think things like that are the power of Caltech and the power of a center like IST that brings people together in a way that just wasn't happening at other schools. And so, I mean, Sizzle came about because as a lot of foresight on campus. So this was something that I think came up in the IST discussions, and I wasn't party to them, but it predated what became an enormous trend in computer science over the decade that followed, of looking at the interface of computation and algorithms and economics and information, and really led to amazing discoveries at Caltech and beyond. And Caltech was differentiated in this space in large part because of the sense of community created by IST, where at most universities, the economists kind of were very dubious about computer scientists coming into their world and writing papers about their topics and talking about things like complexity theory and algorithms and NP hardness and big O notation and worst case bounds and all of these things. It was really a huge barrier to have economists just kind of look away and not give it credibility in some sense. Whereas at Caltech, economists were leading the charge. You had people like John Ledgerd and Charlie Plod and Kim Border and Federico Echenique and Liat Yariv, really like in the offices of computer scientists, hiring computer science postdocs, encouraging computer scientists to spend their time on this and write papers with them and all of this, and this just wasn't happening anywhere else. And it was, to the point where I think, at the Ath on Friday nights, the economics faculty were just there every week, hanging around a pitcher of beer or two, and I was there as the junior faculty with no kids and hanging out and getting to know the senior faculty. And I still think most of my economics was learned at the Ath al fresco in the summer from those folks. And by the time I was teaching my first class in the fall, it was, I think somebody was mentioning the way you learn is you teach, and I think this is one of Shuki's philosophies as well. So I wanted to learn this stuff better, so I taught a topics course on algorithmic game theory, and I showed up the first day, and I had 6 economics faculty sitting front row as I was lecturing on stuff that I was teaching myself, and they were raising their hands every 5 minutes, interjecting, asking questions, pointing out my errors on the whiteboard, doing the homeworks and finding bugs in the homeworks and asking for their grades back. It was a remarkable experience to do that when I had never taken an economics course myself, and then by the second term I was co-teaching with an economics faculty courses that were cross-listed with economics. And I think that is a result of IST and the culture that was created here. And so I think like John was describing with quantum, the econ CS econ information interaction really kind of grew over the years. So it started with Sizzle, and the postdoc program a lot like CMI, but then as it started to run out of the funding that came with the IST initial gifts, it went through the pipeline of looking for NSF centers. It received one of the biggest expeditions in the NSF to keep going, and then eventually was able to come around and get endowment. And so now it lives on in the Center for, or in the Lind Institute, and let me get the name right, I always mix it up, for for economics and management science now. It's one of the main pillars of that center and still takes multiple postdocs every year, still has faculty lunches and seminars weekly, and really has continues to reshape the community at Caltech. And so that lasted and grew. And just around the time I was co-director when we were sort of doing that growth to the endowed center, and just at that time I started to transition to also be the director of IST. And of course, the first thing I did was seek out Shuki, and I think we had a weekly meeting for a month or two where we spent, it always was on the calendar for half hour or 45 minutes, and went to an hour or two, as meetings with Shuki tend to do. And it was just a wonderful opportunity to hear how things grew to the form that they were, why the choices were made the way they were, how different evolutions in the centers went along. And I think one of the things that was remarkable about the funding was, as Richard was going through the initial gifts, there was a very ambitious and gutsy decision to not put anything into endowment. At the start of IST, it was really meant to be a shot in the arm, almost experimental. Like let's put this here, let's see what happens, let's get as much momentum at the beginning as possible, and then let's let things evolve as they evolve, and if they evolve in a way that becomes permanent, great, but we'll give them the support to do that, and if not, that's also great. They have an impact during their lifetime. And when I was stepping into director, it was that moment, that Leonard was describing when the funding was out, and many things were continuing, and many things were looking for their next step, and IST was in the same boat. So IST, itself as the umbrella didn't have funding, and the discussions with Shuki and with Richard at the time were, what should IST become now that 1.0 is done, the shot in the arm is done. It's demonstrated the need and the opportunity at Caltech for this kind of work. How do you make this continue? And so for the 9 years that I was director, the goal was to try to shape how that could continue. And I think Shuki gave me these words when we were starting out, was that it's an incubator for research in information and areas in information at Caltech. And to have an academic incubator on Caltech's campus is crucial, especially at these interdisciplinary areas. And so the focus has been to endow that incubation mode. And so we have pre-seed funding that comes from Carver, the Carver Mead New Adventures Fund, that gives small grants to crazy ideas that come out surrounding information all over campus. We then have seed funding that layers on top of that gets lets those things keep going. We built on the postdoc model and now have a broad set of postdocs and graduate fellowships that are endowed. And really at this point, We've raised the second round for IST, which is typically a little larger than the first, but unlike the shot in the arm model, this has gone into endowment, and now the vision that Shuki started at Caltech can live on permanently. So, thank you, Shuki.
So I hope this has given you a little bit of insight about, kind of IST and its impact. I'll say that, you're hearing today, and we'll hear more today about, Shuki's impact on all of us as individuals and what he's done in his mentoring and other things. But, this is an area where he really impacted the entire organization, the institute, and changed the way that Caltech works in a way that's just amazing and that we've all benefited from. And so with that, we'll close this session. And thank you, Shuki, for everything.
Well, thank you, guys. Just one word. Really, IST is one of those experiences that we have as an organization and also personally, that you are in a bad spot. And then when you are in a bad spot, it's a good opportunity to discover your gifts and your strengths. And I was lucky because in 1988, just 4 years after I came to Caltech, John Seinfeld called me, the chair at that time, for a meeting. And I was busy, new group, and just trying to figure out how I can do my work. He said, listen, we have a problem in CS. We have only 3 faculty members. They are trying to recruit professors for a couple of years now, and they fail. And what I would like you to do is to recruit 5 faculty members in 2 years. I said, okay. I never ran a search. It's in 4 years at Caltech. So I said, that's fine. Let me, first, yes. And second, I need to think how to do it. And then I had this vision that you cannot recruit a person to an institute or to a company if you have 3 depressed people that were failing for the last couple of years. So at least my image was, we need to have a lunch with at least 10 people smiling with a candidate that is visiting, such that we convince a person that it's a great environment. So how do I find more people? So I reached out across campus, and that's how I met many people, this project. And as a result of this search, we have here Eric and Leonard and Stephen Lowe, so it gave a boost. But for me personally, I realize that I have the fortune of being surrounded by fantastic colleagues that, if needed, they'll step in and help. And second, I have no idea what they are doing in their work. So that's a great opportunity to make a connection. And for me, this was the seed of understanding that we can do here something special around information. And to remind you, when Richard and I brainstorm on that, this is way before the iPhone. This is definitely before many things that happen later. So, and of course there was resistance. There was resistance because academic institutions are more conservative than other institutions that we know that go on for many years. But I do want to give David Baltimore the credit. I just talked to him as he walked in today. I told him, listen, I enjoy working with people that are no nonsense. And I really enjoy going into David's office, and typically he will kick me in the knee first thing in our discussion. I really enjoy that. Thank you, David. So he was really engaged intellectually. And that gave me a lot of strength and conviction. Because at the end of the day, the strength of Caltech is in the depths of the people, the love we have for the place, and the ability to collaborate across disciplines. So thank you for your collaboration. The credit goes to you. I was just sitting there and trying to have fun. And John, thanks for reminding me about this meeting with the NASA director, because you said something which I disagreed then and also now. At that meeting, you told me I'm in bad shape. I said, why is that? He said, because you're giving a talk just following me, and I cannot do, you are giving talks that are too good. So I'm in bad shape. I said, this is not true, John. You are a fantastic presenter. So you reminded me of this discussion. I said, I need to work with this guy. Okay, thank you all for the beautiful comments. Yasser, I was crying here. I brought a couple of those. Lulu, same thing with you. I really, yeah, cannot say much more, but thank you very much. Thank you. I think there is coffee.
Thank you.